I welcome on stage David Hunter, Maya Davermation and Denton Howard, who is going actually to facilitate the discussion. So we have a lot of solutions that are available, on the market, but very frequently we do not use them to protect, our users. So that's going to be, the challenge and the debate. Actually, you are going to speak about this afternoon. So we let actually the discussion goes, and we will make sure that we have few time at the end for questions. It's okay? So I give you the floor. And please, yes, there is something important. The session is recorded, so be aware that when you speak, actually, you are recorded. And also, for our speakers, please take also a few minutes, to introduce yourself for the audience. Thank you very much.
So, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Bienvenue, as my very bad French, or as we say in Ireland, Céad Míle Fáilte, which means a million welcomes. To this afternoon session, which I hope you find interesting, invigorating, challenging, and all of those other big words. So to start off with, my name is Denton Howard. I am the Executive Director of INHOPE, which is the International Association of Internet Hotlines. We deal in taking public reports, or I should say the member hotlines take reports from the public on child sexual abuse material, and the objective of the swift identification and removal of that material. We have one of our member hotlines, the OKM, present in the room, which I'm delighted to see. I also, before we get started into today's session, I just want to thank Jean-Christophe Latouka and Caroline Humer for facilitating this conversation. It's very important that we bring up and discuss, again, the information we're going to discuss. So with that said, I just want to deviate a little bit from what, if you like, a normal presentation of what may seem a slightly off kilter. But this is talking about using technologies to identify and to remove, ideally, harmful and illegal content. But it's very important that we focus on those words. What is illegal? What is harmful content? Because it's a very widely used term, but it's often misunderstood. But it's something that we have to be clear, because it sets the bar quite high. Because for something to be illegal, it needs to generally have a criminal or something against the law. And sadly, in my world, it generally also means that there is a victim, and that is a real person, and invariably sometimes it's a child. So I know it sounds crazy, but we use the term, so maybe sometimes it's important to focus when we use that term, what it actually relates to, rather than just something which is statistical. So with that, I would like that to sort of, if you like, flavor the conversation, and especially in the context of this conversation. So many technology tools and solutions, they're around. They're effective at scale if they're used correctly. But many don't use those tools correctly or at all. Is that through the lack of awareness? Is it that the fear of the unknown, what they might find, companies not deploying it? If I don't know about it, it's not there. Or is there a million other reasons? Well, today we're going to hear from two experts in this field, which, and I say experts in the real sense of the word, who are going to sort of give you their input. So with that, I'd like to introduce Maya Davermation from Public. So if you'd like to take the floor.
Sure, thanks so much. Pleasure to meet you all. My name is Maya Davermation. Thanks so much for having me here today. As mentioned, I work for an organization called Public, which is London and Berlin based. We are a private entity, but yes, named Public. We sit at the intersection of public services and technology and innovation. And really what I'm here to kind of bring to the table is that our focus on what we call the policy to product ecosystem. So we work extensively with different stakeholders across the online safety landscape, including government, regulators, safety tech providers, other solutions developers, and civil society organizations. And we help them in a few different ways, but namely just want to bring to the table what I think is most relevant for this conversation, and that is, one, we work quite often with government in trying to help them identify and source solutions. So one of the well-known programs that we did was the Safety Tech Challenge Fund, which tried to help the UK government in trying to understand end-to-end encrypted environments and how children could best be safeguarded through different technologies. We also support with kind of procurement and compliance advisory work for, again, these solutions developers directly. And we also conduct extensive research on this space. And one of the key components of me coming to this panel today was research that we did on the international state of safety tech, which was kind of an overview of the safety tech landscape, looking at solutions providers who are specifically focused on making safer online spaces, including CRISP. But with that, the QR code on the screen is for the report itself, if you want to see it further. Also, my two colleagues here, if you want to quickly raise your hands, have the physical copy, if anyone is interested in taking that as well. But looking forward to the conversation today.
And on my right, I have David Hunter from CRISP.
Hi, folks. So David Hunter, VP of Product at CRISP. We are a global risk intelligence company, now part of the Kroll family of companies, maybe a name familiar to you all. Our job is to provide managed services and build technology that really does three things. It helps leading brands and leading platforms to protect reputations, protect people from real-world physical harm, and protect the platforms from the widest range of online harms and online behaviors. My job as VP of Product is to make sure that we build products that our customers and our users love. And for us, our users is our team of analysts, 650 plus analysts that we work with around the globe. We want to make sure they use our products, they love our products, they use them safely, they don't provide any well-being concerns for them, and that's our world.
Okay, David, thank you very much for that. So to get more into the topic of why we're actually here today. So in terms of deploying technology solutions, there's often a question about technologies is, do you buy or do you build? Okay, so there is always, whether it's a hesitancy or a enthusiasm for, is it going in sort of, do I make new and shiny or do I buy something which is reliable? So why do people hesitate? Well, there's fear. I mentioned in my introduction, there's a fear of, am I going to breach any privacy regulations? Am I going to breach any caveats within national legislation? Well, if I do buy something, how do I trust that that solution works? Do they have, what's their credibility? Just because somebody says they're 100% reliable or they have such a high statistic, how do you know that? And then there's also resource limitations for many organizations, because often the investment that's required on this is seen as by many people as a pure cost with no clear, to use the term ROI or return investment, in other words, on the bottom line. So sort of with those sort of points out there, I'd like to hand over to Maya in regard to their research and what they found.
Yes, thanks for the question. So again, the perspective that I'm bringing is really after kind of engaging a range of different stakeholders across the ecosystem and bringing that back to you all today. So I think there's two different stakeholder groups that I would predominantly want to focus on here. One being government and law enforcement. So we've spoken to solutions providers as well as government and law enforcement themselves and tried to understand kind of what's the dilemma here? Specifically, why are they not willing to buy? And I think two key themes came up, really. One being kind of an element of trust, being able to trust that the solutions that would be embedded in are secure, are safe, are trustworthy, ultimately, at the end of the day. And the second element is, I think one of the challenges is that, realistically speaking, unfortunately, government and law enforcement is oftentimes a little bit further behind some of the kind of solutions that are on the market today and some of the thinking too. So it's kind of that element of awareness building and trust building that would really be able to kind of enable that, that acquisition or buying. The other stakeholder group that I would want to focus on is platforms themselves, who I think are another kind of key buyer in this environment. And what we're hearing is a few different things, I think, based on also platform size specifically. For larger platforms, of course, you have the resources, you have the capabilities internally to be developing out these solutions firsthand. However, from smaller platforms, what we're hearing is that there is a keen interest in kind of taking in, acquiring or kind of using next-gen solutions and doing so effectively. But the challenge there is really around the kind of financial elements. How much do these solutions cost? And I think that ties to your point on ROI, is that it's tricky. What is the return on investment in online safety? What is the return on investment in these tools? And specifically trying to understand what this means in terms of user retention, brand safety, and also staff retention as well. I think one of the panels we were hearing earlier is it's important to keep staff members safe through this experience as well. But those are the key themes we're hearing.
Okay, thank you very much. David, anything you want to add on that one?
I think the point you made about building versus buying is something we see a lot. One is, you mentioned about awareness, people knowing that these solutions exist. If I go to Google and I search for it, what is it I'm actually looking for? What's out there? So anything we can do to actually provide more awareness for people of the things that are on the market. But there is a kind of technology bias to building rather than buying. There is a focus on building something, creating something shiny and new, rather than putting things in place. And a lot of the times what we see is that people are basically building the same thing. They're building trust and safety plumbing without really getting to the new or the next gen solutions that really solve the problems. So if everybody's spending their budget and their resources on building a tool that can just handle user reports or handle moderation queues, it's really a lot of expense that's being spent by everybody to do the same thing. So knowing the solutions that are available, understanding how all of the suppliers and the players in the market fit together to give an overall solution. Another is around trust, as you say. So CRISP has been around since 2005 working on this problem. A really early pioneer, our CEO created a social platform back in 1999. So he created CRISP to solve the problems he had, well, nearly 25 years ago now. But there are a lot of, as you say, options within the market, and there is a level of understanding about, well, is this going to work? Is this going to do what it says on the tin? Is this going to be around in 12 months? I've been to sessions where people have stood up and talked about their new product in the trust and safety space, but they've also referred to themselves as serial entrepreneurs or, as tech entrepreneurs. There really is, I think, a requirement that if people are building and creating solutions within the trust and safety space, they really understand it. They know what's going on. They know the problems that are going to come, rather than just building a solution that deals with the low-hanging fruit of a problem, but not going deep on what actually is the problem. The third thing as well is, in terms of things that are available, CRISP learned quite a number of years ago that actually giving somebody technology is okay, but actually without the data, without the team to run it, without the team providing the knowledge that continually trains these solutions, actually it doesn't work either. You can't just give somebody a very, very advanced piece of kit and then it will work forever. So access to data, I know we've talked about it for years, that actually without any data, and whether it's your own data or from anybody else, a lot of these solutions just won't work from the get-go.
Thank you, David. Just a sort of a side point to what David just raised, which is he talked about the plumbing, and I thought it was a good analogy. But we also talk about how we have to look at the traffic in terms of what's going to be moving through that plumbing. So we have various, and I mentioned at the very start, we talked about illegal and harmful material and what does that look like, and I was referencing CSAM. But one of the things that is there isn't much common standardization in terms of, and to use the lovely technical term, taxonomy is a lovely word, but I think everybody gets what that means. But so there needs to be, if it's at all possible, common standards. Now, I'm doing a very subtle plug here, which is that in regard to within InHub, one of our projects we're running, which is in regard to an ontology project for CSAM tagging, which is called the Global Standard Project. That's just one example of trying to get a common process or a common approach to the traffic that sits on these, so that and if there's common sets of tools, then that tool set can be used if somebody decides to build their own, or it can be incorporated into one of the existing platforms that provides a service like that. So again, that's one. I'm plugging my own, or well, it's not ours as in a possession, but in terms of the one that we're leading. But there are other issues and for other types of content out there, and it's something to look at the common standards out there, not just an in-house standard. I just thought it was an important point to mention. So I'm going to just come to really in regard to different opinions, because and I'm going to come to Dave and Chris in the context. So really, I've got a question, and we sort of, when I was thinking about today, I was like, what would be the points that would be relevant? So from your perspective, Dave, all right, what's needed to promote the use of available solutions?
So awareness, we mentioned it already. Making sure that people know what is out there. Kind of repeat that again. ROI's come up a few times. So it's a difficult conversation to have, talking about some of these solutions in terms of ROI. Why should I? I've had orders come through the machine to say, well, we need to buy new T-shirts for a conference we're going to. We need to buy new things for the office. We also need to plug this tool in that's going to make sure that CSAM isn't traded on our platforms. And one is about, well, how do we help the people that want to bring these kind of tools or these kind of solutions in actually explain the ROI to the person that writes the check? How do we help them visualize or verbalize, this is why this really matters? We have a great client of ours who basically use that same sort of analogy about, we spend a lot of money, and I'm saying we as a platform, we spend a lot of money on this stuff. Almost look around this building on what we spent money on. Why are we even having the debate about whether we need to put these kind of safety tools or these safety mechanisms in place? So getting that across, helping people understand how to create the business case that these things go in, absolutely will be helpful. And then the third is that often the decision should we put this thing in place? Should we put this new tool or this new product in as part of our stack? And often one of the debates that comes around is, well, what is everybody else doing? Are we doing any better or worse than others in this space? So one is helping people understand where they sit across their peers. I think in technology, people want to know, am I doing as well or better than anybody else? But then also pushing the drive forward to say, well, one of you can actually take the leap forward and become the leading part of this problem, and not just doing the same as everybody else, not just doing the basics that everybody else in the space is doing.
Dave, just to take that point, so really the thing I took from that is incentive. What is the incentive that's driving, or what's whether it's a push, somebody being pushed into this, or whether it's always better if somebody's pulled into that's attractive. So, like, what would you say is the biggest incentive?
So there was a good conversation earlier about, at the moment, a lot of the time this is looked at as a cost center. This is a cost that we've got on the sheet, just like we're paying for any other tool that we have in there, as opposed to being a revenue generator or a revenue protector in terms of the platforms. And I think certainly when I joined this space nearly a decade ago, it was niche. It wasn't something that people knew about. It wasn't something that you would be hearing a conversation about in the playground. But actually, trust and safety, as kind of two words, are now pretty much known to everybody. They headline news, whether it's through misinformation around COVID or issues that children are facing on platforms. So I think the incentive around this will absolutely protect your platform. It'll protect the reputation. It will keep the value of this thing that you've built in the billions as opposed to almost zero. We've seen platforms go because of safety issues in the past. And I think that will only get worse as this becomes a much, much more known thing. As users expect safety, and they expect that the places that they're putting their information, that they're having their online experiences, are safe, basically.
Well, again, I'll again throw that one over to Maya.
Yes. Well, a few points here. First, I would challenge one of the things that you said, just in terms of kind of the awareness around trust and safety, because I don't know if that's the case across the globe. And I feel very encouraged being in environments like these where we are all aware of what we're talking about, but oftentimes what we're hearing from conversations, particularly with solutions developers, is that they're reaching kind of barriers because people on the other side don't really understand. And I think one of the elements in being able to drive next-gen solutions forward is really, as you're saying, kind of awareness, but behind that, convening people and specifically doing training, because I think there is kind of a lack of education in certain spaces, particularly with potential buyers from government and regulatory perspective, where more training could hopefully drive more awareness and then drive trust and kind of, you know, enable these solutions to be developed. So I would just say that first and foremost. Another element that we keep on hearing through our research, and I guess as is expected, is there's more need for investment, right? But it's not just about any type of investment. We need investment very specifically for trust and safety tools and solutions. It can't be for cybersecurity as a whole. It needs to be specifically for online safety. And we're not there yet. But one of the things that we were hearing from this research that we did was that trust and safety is taking a similar path to cybersecurity, and hoping that we can actually learn from some of the learnings that they have had over the last 10 years and kind of integrate that in. And the last point kind of want to stress as well, and David, you mentioned this at the beginning too, is that we're very encouraged by the kind of acceleration in terms of data standardization. However, there's still a lack in terms of training environments and sandboxes, and just being able to, yes, find solutions that work well for specific clients, but being able to roll out those solutions across different clients, different industries, and also across the globe as well.
I was going to say, in terms of the point you raise about the global problem, it's something that we witness a lot, which is solutions that are put in place typically concern English and kind of Western culture on platforms. And actually, I know we're here talking about kind of next-gen solutions and next-gen problems. Actually, there is a huge raft of problems that haven't been solved really for a long time or for forever in anything but kind of those Western environments in English. The level of, we look a lot at discoverability. So how easy is it to discover harmful content, either as a perfectly legitimate user, if you're a 40-year-old mother browsing the platform, are you going to come across harmful content? Or if you're a bad actor, are you going to encounter the content that you want to find? Discoverability is fairly low in English for a lot of these things. But actually, you move into Spanish, you move into Portuguese, you move into Russian, Arabic, and other languages. These problems haven't been solved, haven't even really been scratched in terms of the surface of the problem. So, yeah, certainly investment in those areas. You know, actually solving the problem in those. It's not a typical translation problem. You know, you don't just change the word from English to a, you know, whatever language. You have to understand the culture and the context of how these things are being posted and shared and distributed online.
I couldn't agree with more. But what I would also say is the danger we have is what I call the echo chamber danger. Everybody in this room, I think I can fairly safely say, we're all on the same page, okay? We're all the believers. It's a bit like everybody in the church. It's like everybody's a believer, okay? But the question is, how do we get the non-believers into the church, okay? So it's like the important thing is the people who aren't here. So how do we incentivize? And I'm coming back to the incentivize point, because it's in human psychology, there are, you know, why do we do things? Okay, we do things generally, we have different motivators. Okay, so when we're talking about a corporate entity, we're talking about what are the prime motivators? Well, it's like, one, it's what will it give us to the growth of the organization and the development of the organization and the improvement, whether it's brand awareness, this is going to strengthen our brand because we will be the leader, we're the safest platform when we sell on that basis. But equally, on the other end of it, is it the equivalent, is this investment in, is it seen as a mitigation or almost like paying your insurance in terms of going, well, if something bad happens, or this will stop something bad. So the question is, which becomes more important? So it's not really a question to the panel, but it's something to bear that in mind. So when we think and we talk, it's important that we have to sell it to get people. So if fear is going to be their motivator, if they're not doing anything at all, we need to make it clear that, listen, if you don't do this, then there is a particular negative effect on it. I love your analogy, David, when you went, billion-dollar brands going to zero because something bad happens and they didn't do anything, and vice versa. So it's a mitigation exercise, but equally in the going forward side of things is an investment to be seen as the leader. That's with the positive. So again, just a sort of a little observation. It's really important. Now, with that said, to come back to the point, and I'm going to come back to Maya. So to come back to the point about reusing what's already there. So why don't we use what's already available? Why isn't everybody taking the existing tools and using those rather than going to the new?
I mean, yeah, I think it's the million-dollar question, right?
It's actually probably $1 billion question, really.
Pulling it up. No, I think there's a few different things here, and we've spoken to a few of them already. I think awareness is really a critical component to this, and trust is really a critical component to this. I said this on an earlier panel, but we're at a trust and safety conference. The trust isn't always felt, right? And you really need to be able to enable that. And with that in mind, there's a few things that we heard in terms of what could enable that and that trust and kind of bring that forward. And I think that's, a lot of the onus comes onto solutions providers themselves, but some of the things that we've been hearing is kind of the need for risk assessments, right? And being able to drive those forward, taking into consideration safety by design. It's something that's kind of always heard across the industry, I think, and is spoken about in so many different ways, but is really so necessary, especially when you have circumstances when stakeholders are buying solutions. They anticipate that you're going to be able to kind of protect people online, but it's also ensuring that your solutions have safety by design embedded in and you're safe yourself, right? It goes kind of both ways. I think also there's a big opportunity around layering solutions too, and thinking through how different tools and solutions can be kind of combined and thought through together. But all of this really comes back to the ROI point more than anything. And I think over time, as regulation comes out, as providers become bigger, as they start to work with different stakeholders across the ecosystem, and we have a better assessment in terms of what that ROI really is, I feel really confident that those barriers are going to start being brought down.
David, if I could throw that question at you, just why don't we use what's already available?
I think one of the things at the moment in this kind of like probably last 6, 9, 12-month period is whether it's not using what's available or actually not necessarily using anything at all and trying to ride this wave of layoffs, cost cutting, the way that the market's reacting, almost behaving like there's a recession. And actually I think that some organizations are really riding that period. One of the things with any solution, whether it's a kind of a fully managed service or something you integrate and put your own people on, is there is work to do. There is work to get this integrated and onboarded. You need a team to do it. You need a team to then process the results of whatever it is. If you put in a new tool that identifies CSAM, well then who's going to manage the outcome from it? So I think there is a hesitation on simply the work that is involved in doing this, but it's the reality that if this program is going to be put in place, it's going to generate some work or some cost for somebody. So that's something that needs to get done. But I think the counter to it, and I think Maya, you mentioned it about organizations keeping their teams. One of the things that I've spoken about probably for 12 months or so is I think one of the big risks to people, if you're running a platform with a kind of trust and safety workforce, is maintaining that workforce, whether it's because you're being asked to lay off a proportion of your staff, and that may include trust and safety staff, but also making sure that those staff believe that you're doing the right thing, that they work in a team or an organization where they actually can make some change, as opposed to, we're not getting rid of the problems that we see. We can see the problems on the front end, and the solutions that we've actually put in place are not dealing with this. So I think the organizations that get it right will certainly maintain those teams, and they will have the army that they need to solve this problem. But without it, those very relatively small number of people that work in this trust and safety space will go to the platforms that are doing it right, that are committing their powers to do something about it. And again, they'll leave everybody else behind.
Okay, well, I don't think, again, nobody's going to disagree with that, I don't think. But a couple of things on that, again, to take a couple of observations. And you mentioned the people power aspect. So we have an expression that we use within the INHUB context is INHUB, and the tagline is powered by people, okay, because behind it is the analysis and all of that good stuff. But there's also, we have to think in terms of the future, okay, so like everything we've discussed is kind of very much in the now, and how maybe we could improve or things could be done better based on the now tools. So in terms of thinking in terms of that, we talk next generation, we talk in the future. We need to, if you like, well, I'm not a technologist, and I know David isn't, and I know Maya isn't, we're more, but the thing is we need to think about what's happening in the future. So without getting into the technical context, looking into your crystal ball, David, and I'll come to you, Maya, as well in a minute, what do you think is coming down the road in regard to the technological solutions, without getting technical?
Well, the question is always, will this actually be solved, and will this be a solved problem? And the unfortunate answer is no. This will continue to evolve. Obviously, AI is advancing at a lightning rate. For everybody that's seen the kind of evolution of generative AI over the last few months. But what it means is that bad actors and harmful online behaviors are going to evolve in a similar way. This is again, I like an analogy. You can build AI to tell you that this is a water bottle with a blue cap and it has this brand on it, because that's what it is. Whereas, in terms of online behaviors, harmful behaviors, these groups, these individuals are trying to not be caught. They're trying to blend in with the normal user base online. So there's going to be an acceleration, likely, because of the advances in technology. So there therefore has to be an advance in the technology that we're building to fight it. However, to a earlier point, there's actually some quite small iterative steps that can be put in place that will make a massive difference. So dealing with some of the language issues, dealing with the fact that some basic filtering may have been put in place on a platform so you can't find something, so adding an extra letter at the end then returns the content you were looking for. Some of these things are not, we don't want to make this a huge challenge that means people think, this is so wild, I don't think we can solve it. Actually, I think it's probably keep it simple for a lot of this stuff will actually help us a long way without us also getting distracted with the new, shiny, let's go and build that new thing when we haven't solved today's problems, which maybe counter to your question, but
no, if we all agree there's something wrong, okay. It's Maya.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question. I think, yes, I'm not a technologist. The things that we're hearing on the landscape, I'm sure, are the things that a lot of people in this room are hearing, or in the context of focusing on kind of deep fakes, generative AI, needing to work our way around live streaming, even though it's kind of everywhere already. But I think what we'll really need to be doing is, I keep stressing this point, and I recognize that I'm in a kind of convener role, but I really stress the point of collaboration, because ideally we'll get to a point where the technologies on the ground are working ahead of the bad actors. And I think that's the ideal point that we really need to be getting to. And the only way to be able to do that is through convening, through collaborating, through kind of data sharing agreements and kind of data testing opportunities, and building up the confidence to be able to tackle on some of these new issues with solutions that are currently working well, with the slight adaptations as they are needed. But one of the things that I haven't said yet, and I must stress with this as well, especially in a room with solutions providers, is that user centricity is really, really key to this, particularly for solutions that are user facing, in the sense that we cannot continue to build out solutions where the user themselves are not integrated and their feedback is not integrated into the cycle. It's not effective, and it doesn't take into consideration their needs. And I think particularly on that side, as they are confronted with emerging harms themselves at the forefront, I think that will be really, really critical as well.
I'm really glad you raised the point of the user, because that's where I was about to go. Because users, obviously, when we talk about a user or platform, there's many sides to a transaction. So if we're talking about in the negative context, where a user and a victim, if something bad is happening. I mentioned earlier about mitigation and about protecting and return on investment and all of those lovely buzzwords. But one thing we have to remember is we're dealing with a victim at the center. And really, it boils down to, if we're going to, and imagine if I was an organization, am I doing this for risk mitigation? Am I doing it for brand reputation? Or am I doing it because it's the right thing to do? Because there is a victim at the center of this. Whether that is your child, your sister, your brother, yourself, okay? Because obviously I'm focused on child sexual abuse material, but we're all talking about it. And if I could point out in the room, I mean, we have the Revenge Porn Hotline from the UK here, and they're dealing with adults' content. We have the helplines represented, Carl Hopwood is here, the reports that they get from terms of kids in trouble, AOKM from the Netherlands, and the number of projects that they're running for, the list goes on. So it's not just about CSAM. So really, organizations and companies, when they are deciding about what they are going to do or not going to do, as the case may be, they should come back to the point of, are they servicing the victim? Because the victim is also a user, okay? So if I sound a little animated, it's because I am. I feel very strongly myself. Maybe I shouldn't be expressing personal opinions. But I don't get the opportunity very often, so I'm going to take the luxury of it. So with that said, and why I raise that point is that all of the lists I've just mentioned are a very small sample of stakeholders, okay, supporting and trying to help the victims. So if there's anybody listening out there in the internet, I would please say is, if you are thinking of developing or deploying or using a service existing, reach out to the stakeholders who can inform you and to be better informed about what you're trying to deal with and may again have to deal with in the future. Because when I say we, I mean collectively, we tend to hear about stuff before you will. So it's really important that you do that. So so that's my end of my little diatribe, which I hope I haven't bored you to death. So we're coming to the end of the planned program. So I just want to give the opportunity for David, and then I'll come back to Maya for any sort of finishing remarks.
Probably in terms of what you say about the user and the real world impact of what we do. As I say, having been in this space for a long time, having worked with people and working with people that have been in it even longer, actually it's the rare but really impactful stories about the real world harm that we were all able to prevent that really means we come back and do this. Why are we going to be here in another year's time talking about these solutions and trying to deal with this thing? And hearing that the work you've done to identify online threats has prevented a school shooting was something that the CRISP team had recently. So they had a threat that was posted online. They were able to refer it to platforms we work with who may have had live streams taking place on their platforms. But super importantly, we were able to report it to law enforcement in Buenos Aires. They were able to deal with the individual who was posting an imminent and credible threat. And actually the picture of the school in the middle of somewhere in Argentina with nothing happening to it is the reason why our team will be fueled for the next 12 months that this really matters, that the code we're writing, the work we're doing to come up with all of the parts of the solution really makes sense. And probably more akin to the kind of well-being talk that was on earlier, but I think that all of us sharing these stories as much as we can, we can't really go into the full detail of all of these things, but it means that we'll all come back. It means that this room will still be full, and yeah, it's it really has a real impact on what we're doing, because it can become difficult that online feels like online, and then we leave the internet and we go back to our everyday lives. It's 2023. This is online and offline aren't really words in the lexicon anymore. It's just the world, whether that gets delivered through, you know, somebody's letterbox or on a, you know, a message that's posted online. So, yeah, I think that was my.
Thank you,
where my head was
Maya.
going.
No, completely agree with what you're saying, David. And what I'll just add on to that really is being in the fortunate position that we are in at Public, where we're able to speak to so many different stakeholders across the entire globe. I really want to stress that I do feel that the solutions are kind of here with us, you know, and it's just about getting the right people in the room together to make sure that the solutions that are working today are able to also target the next gen kind of needs that we have. So looking forward to seeing everyone back in a year, I'll say, but really kind of encouraged by these conversations and hope that we can continue to bring them forward.
Okay, that sort of brings us around very circular to the sort of the closing out, because we started on time and I'm going to try and make sure we finish on time. But so just it's important as I close this out, I want to just first of all thank Maya on my left. I think she's articulated the positions and the perspectives from Public very clearly, but also as a human being, not just, and David's also a human. David Hunter, and from the perspective of his own, and very well informed, and really, if you buy him a drink, you will hear some scary things. So I know I probably shouldn't say that, but sure, that's how it is. Yeah, it's on the internet, yeah. But so the internet can buy him a drink also. It can be put online. So I also like to thank the team here from the Trust and Safety Forum for facilitating this conversation, and then I'd also like to thank you, the audience. I hope you've listened, I hope you've learned, and I hope you walk away with questions and hopefully a few answers. So with that, I want to thank everybody, and I'd like to give you a little bit of a round of applause. So thank you very much.